Hello, and welcome to HCS Connects. I'm Kelly Gorel with Hampton City Schools. Today we have two special guests with us, our Superintendent, Dr. Jeffery Smith, and our Deputy Superintendent, Dr. John Caggiano. So welcome to the both of you. We are here because we've got some big news that's just come out actually from the state today, the 18-19 accreditation rates. And we all know that, that's usually a hot topic whenever we're talking about schools. So we're glad that you're here today to kind of tell us, what does this mean and what's going on? So one of the things, and I'll start with Dr. Smith, is that this year that accreditation system has changed, correct?
It has changed. In particular, there are 6 indicators in terms of looking at accreditation at the elementary and the middle school at that particular level. There are 3 new areas there in terms of indicators. For example, achievement gaps in English, achievement gaps in math, and chronic absenteeism. And so we will maintain the 3 that we've had in previous years, but 3 additional areas in terms of indicators at the elementary and secondary level. And certainly Dr. Caggiano would share, I'm sure, with the additional indicators at the high school level.
Yes, at the high school level, we're also looking at now taking into account the dropout rate, graduation rate, as well as something a little bit further down the road called the College Career and Civic Indicator. And that is still to come. VDOE hasn't set quite yet criteria for that. But as Dr. Smith alluded to, a much more comprehensive approach now to school accreditation, which I think divisions throughout the Commonwealth are pleased with, in particular now that we're getting into the recognition of student growth, which is something I know school divisions have been asking for quite some time.
So what does that mean, student growth?
So student growth, if I take, for example, a 3rd grade student, which is the first year in Virginia where students sit for a standards of learning assessment, and let's take a look at the reading test, my performance on that test at the end of 3rd grade. And let's say perhaps I didn't pass that test, but I demonstrated that I was close to proficiency. Next year, come back as a 4th grade student, receive some additional interventions perhaps, and sit for the test in the spring and I pass that test, or I don't pass that test. And if I didn't pass that test, but I demonstrated growth, notable growth based on tables that the Virginia Department of Education will set, then the state now is recognizing students for that growth.
So before, growth was not part of the accreditation system.
It was not. And for years we have said that we believe that it was important to measure student growth and progress in terms of from one year to the next year. And so we are elated that the accreditation system has now moved in that direction, whereby we're measuring growth, academic growth over time for young people as well.
And one other piece with the accreditation system, the old version, there were multiple ways of being accredited, like 6 or different steps. Now there are 3. You're either accredited with conditions, or not accredited.
Or denied.
Or denied.
Right.
So those are the 3 now. So that's changed a little bit as well, is that there are only 3 factors for
Correct.
that. Okay. So how has Hampton fared? How are we doing right now with accreditation?
Yeah, we're pleased with our accreditation results as it measures student performance for us. And so when we look at the year of 2014 and 15, we had 40% of our schools were fully accredited. The following year, in the academic year of 2015, 14 and 15, and then 15 and 16, 41% of our schools were fully accredited. And then 55% of our schools fully accredited. The following year, 66% of our schools were fully accredited. And we're very pleased this year to share with the public and certainly with our families that we will have 93% of our schools fully accredited. And so these are exciting times for us here in Hampton.
Well, it's very exciting. You've gone from 66 to 93% in one academic school year. So tell us a little bit about what does that 93% mean?
I think it takes us back, I think, to our core mission of teaching and learning. And in essence, it's academic excellence for every child, every day, whatever it takes. And we have the commitment of our teachers and support staff, the school board, families, and certainly our students and the community at large and their commitment to public education. But we've spent a lot of time here in Hampton building from places of strength. And so as we've begun to build from those places of strength, We focused on a systems approach and the importance of a systems approach to ensure equity across all schools, and with that to have a guaranteed and viable curriculum. And so we're real pleased at this particular point. We have rewritten 183 curricula. We're also excited because as a part of that teaching and learning, direct instruction with lesson plan and design, we have young people who are now setting goals, and so we have students who are setting goals, and that is a very important part. So, you know, we have a very strong systems approach whereby we believe that we can institutionalize those best practices, and I know Dr. Caggiano will add and share some of the other great things that we're doing here in Hampton as well.
And taking a deeper dive, as Dr. Smith mentioned, the 93%, we were very close to having 100% of our schools accredited this year. If you break down those numbers, we have 29 schools in the division. Right. And so 27 out of 29, of course, comprises that 93%. And if we go by level, so 17 out of 18 elementary schools, for example, are now accredited. 5 out of 5 middle schools fully accredited. 2 out of 2 pre-K through 8 schools fully accredited. And then 3 out of 4 high schools fully accredited. And if we look at the 2 schools in the division who did not quite meet the benchmarks this year, one would be Craft Elementary at the elementary level and Hampton High School. And both of those schools were very close, and it was the same indicator. It was, as Dr. Smith mentioned, the different subgroups. So if you look at the subgroup of disadvantaged students in the area of math, Hampton High missed that mark just by 3 percentage points, and Craft missed that mark by 5 percentage points. So those schools are addressing that through school improvement planning processes this year. So again, very close to 100%.
So close to 100%, not accreditation denied.
Not accreditation denied, accredited with conditions. And the condition is that the school's leadership teams work through the school improvement planning process to address targeted deficits, in this case, in the area of math.
Excellent. So great news though, 27 of 29.
That's right.
So close to 100%. And Dr. Smith mentioned, you know, that there are things that we've put into place, you know, to that systems approach and so forth to get those schools to that 100%. I know that there's a little bit more going on though. Can you explain some of the other things that are happening in Hampton City Schools to get us to that 100%?
Sure, certainly. There are a number of things you know, we've talked about and discussed, including some things we've shared with the board in reference to reasons we attribute as to some of the gains really across the board. In the recent board report, we talked about and shared with the board, in addition to what Dr. Smith mentioned, the guaranteed and viable curriculum, taking a systems approach. We talked about a really strategic emphasis on literacy. Dr. Smith has charged the team, the division, with really a focus on literacy from birth to post-secondary. So we've put a lot of eggs in the early literacy basket, and we're seeing the fruits of that labor now. I think when you look at our performance on grade 3, for example, in reading, really narrowing the gap between performance of Hampton students and students across the state. So we're seeing gains in early literacy. So, and really it's been K-12 literacy. We're seeing small group instruction as another reason we attribute at the middle school level, and in the area of reading, to some gains in reading across the board in our middle schools. And then at the high school, looking at some things we're doing in reference to feedback to individual students in the area of writing. So that was one big focus for us, has been literacy. I would say another would be collaborative practices. A number of examples in our division, just a couple to share with you this morning, would be one, the collaborative practices between the offices of special education in our division and the English Language Arts Department. So looking at the subgroup population of students with disabilities, they've done a lot to collaborate on what's good for all kids. And so the sharing there has also resulted in significant gains for students with disabilities in the area of reading. And then collaboration just with our teachers. Can't say enough about the sharing of best practices across the division from some phenomenal educators.
And those phenomenal educators have had a huge impact on many of our subgroups, because talk to us a little bit about subgroups, where we're not just looking at all students, but there are specific subgroups and some of the growth that we've seen just this past year.
Sure. So if we look at some of the specific subgroups, for example, when we talked earlier about the achievement gap in terms of English and mathematics, then we move to the specific subgroups, and so then we start with by race, and also students who are impacted by poverty. The state has certainly identified that subgroup as disadvantaged, and then students with disabilities. And so those are the three major subgroups as we look at the overall accreditation process. and the way the state ultimately that they're reporting the data.
And in reporting that data, Hampton City Schools is trending above the state in 2 of those subgroups, correct?
We are trending above the state in 2 of those areas, and Dr. Caggiano, I know he would be very happy to share with you those specific areas.
Certainly. So when we take a look at reading, again, literacy is a big focus for our division. When we take a look at reading, when we look at subgroup populations such as disadvantaged students, African American students, we've been trending now for a couple of years ahead of the division, ahead of the state when we look at those specific subgroup performances. So again, if I'm a parent and I want to go to the Virginia Department of Education website, there's a tool there. They have this called the School Quality Profiles. In that tool, I can take a look at reading overall results in the division, for example, compared to the state, and I can drill down to these different subgroups. And what I would see if I were to drill down in reading to disadvantaged students and African American students, I would see how Hampton continues to outperform the state with those 2 subgroups. As Dr. Smith mentioned, what we often do in meetings on a regular basis is sit down and take a look at data and where we're trending. And some additional data, again, we've been pleased to share with the board. For example, in grade 4, if you just look at the pass rate of students with disabilities in reading, 44%. Dr. Smith talked about every child, every day, whatever it takes. And now with the recognition of growth, we now move for last year, grade 4, for example, students with disabilities, 71% of those students either passed and or showed growth, which was, again, head and shoulders above state averages. So very pleased with the performance we're seeing with subgroups as well as all students.
So prior to the growth factor, as far as the accreditation system,
Right.
looking at that, kind of just making it very clear to our parents and our viewers, if they did not have the growth factor, we would still be looking at 44%. Because they're now looking at student growth, we can say 71% are making that growth towards accreditation.
If we take a deeper dive into those numbers, so 44% of students with disabilities in grade 4 passed the reading test. However, what the state lets you do, again, is they say if you were a student in grade 3 and took the test and did not pass, and you're a student with a disability, if you take that test as a 4th grader and you now pass, we're also going to give you credit for what's called recovery. And so you demonstrated not only did you close gaps from 3rd grade, but you're also on grade level. So the state, for example, that would move the pass rate from 44 to 58%. And then when we look at the boys and girls in 4th grade, in that subgroup of students with disabilities who did not pass but showed growth based on what the state said was permissible growth,
Right.
acceptable growth, then that then jumps that rate, that combined rate, to 71%. Which again, if I'm a parent with a student with a disability, a teacher with a student with a disability, I still might not have a pass rate on that assessment, but showing marked growth in comparison to students throughout the state.
Which is wonderful.
Yes.
It really is.
And it is where we should be in terms of our educational system, to really identify and show growth over time with young people from one grade level to the next grade level, looking in particular when we look at by content area, so whether it's in English or math, to show that indeed young people are growing academically from one year to the next year. And that's very important.
And that was my next question, because we keep talking about literacy and reading, but it's not just literacy and reading, it's also math. We've seen some big gains in math as well, particularly I believe at the 6th grade level, is that right?
We have, yes, 6th grade, middle school, some big gains in math, really in a number of areas, but since you mentioned middle school, we'll highlight that. So for example, in grade 6, if we were just to look at the students who passed the assessment in grade 6, 77% of our boys and girls pass, which is a little bit above, I believe, state average. However, when you also factor in growth, what parents will see is that now 90% of our students really
Right.
Either between a combination of passing and demonstrating growth. So that figure that gets reported for accreditation purposes is 90% of our 6th graders.
Excellent.
With the combined rate there.
So we're on the right path. We're on the
We are.
move, as we like to say in Hampton City Schools. So what's next? How are we going to get our schools to 100%?
You know, we will continue the excellent work that we have been a part of. We look at Dr. Caggiano and his team, the department in particular, when we look at the curriculum, the assessment that's going on there, and the rewrites with the curriculum. And so we're excited. We will continue that and sustain our efforts within the Department of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment. But also we will continue to have a strong professional development program here in Hampton, because at the end of the day, we're a human resource organization, And so we cannot do this work without a strong workforce. And so we will continue our efforts, and we're very thankful to have a committed staff. And we will also continue to partner with our families as we go forward to ensure that we're providing our young people with the resources that they need, but not only the resources that they need, but also the support that they need along the way in this important work. So you have the curriculum, instruction, assessment. We will continue to focus on our systems approach here in Hampton, and really institutionalize the work that we have begun. I don't know whether Dr. Caggiano might add some other thoughts to that, but.
Sure, I'd add some additional things. There's so many great things that are happening. I can't say enough about the work. Dr. Smith mentioned the professional development. Can't say enough about the work that our executive directors for school leadership are doing and working closely with our building principals and leading that professional development.
That's right.
Our three executive directors, Dr. Haynes, Dr. Woods, and Dr. Owens, participate on a frequent basis on instructional walkthroughs. So that's a big part of identifying some best practices in Hampton. So they're in schools a lot, and they'll take those best practices and share. So that's going to continue to happen. We have an in-house developed what we call response to intervention database. You heard Dr. Smith earlier mention goal setting. And so what this allows our students and teachers to do, really converse about every child, every day, whatever it takes, to sit down and say, where did I start the year? Where am I at the end of the first marking period? Where am I at the end of this month? As a kindergartner, having conversation with my teacher about what letters, sounds do I still need to work on. So that database allows us to have data at our fingertips, both at central office level and individual building level and individual classroom level. So that's powerful. And then with some exciting new initiatives, I think this year, one in particular, the digital backpack that we're beginning to roll out. And so at the high school level, if I'm a student, for example, a 9th grade student, I now will have a digital writing portfolio that will grow throughout my 4 years in high school, and as we continue to transform our high schools with career academies. So that'll be a part of the career academy piece, and I'll be able to take that with me after my 4 years, among some other things that will be a part of that digital backpack.
And I would also add, when we talk about the academies, we will continue our work there in the transformation at our 4 high schools in particular, transforming the teaching and learning, student engagement, and civic and business engagement with our partners at the high school level as well. So a lot of great things that are going on here in Hampton. We will continue to focus on keeping the main thing. That's very important, to have a laser focus, a systems approach, guaranteed viable curriculum, to make certain that we have authentic assessments to measure what we consider to be important in terms of that teaching and learning within the classroom, using technology to support the teaching and learning. So we will continue that, but I think also to know that within the high school structure, we will continue to move forward with our transformation there, and that's very important work that we're moving from now, really looking at moving from the 5 pocket academies that we have, that we'll have in place, as of course this year we know, 16 wall-to-wall academies, and we have moved within the division from really 18 career pathways to what is now 44 career pathways. So we'll continue to expand that and to use workforce development data to guide the transformation at the high school as well.
So there's definitely a lot going on. A lot to celebrate. Back to 93%, huge accomplishment from 66 to 93. But as we know in education, you celebrate for about a day, and then you roll up your sleeves and you dive right back in.
Moving forward.
To have that good work going forward. Well, thank you both for joining us today. We truly appreciate it. We know that accreditation, it can be very difficult to understand for our families and our community and so forth, and it's ever changing,
right?
As we see this year. So, like I said, a lot to celebrate, and but a lot of interesting information today. So, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on HCS Connects. In the meantime, stay connected with us through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, our division's website, or YouTube channel. Thanks and have a great day.